Well, hello, Rick Miracle here with another video of my series. I'm making 50 videos called Freemasonry and Satanism. And this will be video number 27, and the subject is a book review, of course. All my videos are book reviews. And this is a 1934 edition of the New Age magazine, published by the Freemasons, as you can see on the bottom. And that's a Freemason temple there. My most recent video, number 26, was a 1927 edition. So anyways, as a American citizen with some ingenuity, I thought I would take the video outdoors. See how I can play around with this. Meanwhile, we can learn a little bit about what's in this book, and you can see where I live. Behind me is my backyard. Anyways, just scooting on through this. As you can see here, it's the New Age, October 1934, magazine by the Freemasons. We approve and reassert our belief in the free and compulsory education of the children of our nation in public primary schools supported by public taxation, which all children shall attend and be instructed in the English language only, without regard to race or creed. And we pledge the efforts of the membership of the Rite to promote by all lawful means the organization, extension, and development to the highest degree of such schools, and to continually oppose the efforts of any and all who seek to limit, curtail, hinder, or destroy the public school system of our land. The Supreme Council of 1921. I'm reading the first page here. This publication is the official organ of the Supreme Council, Mother Council of the world. This is the Freemasons now. The Mother Councils of the world, of the Inspectors General, Knights Commander, of the House of the Temple of Solomon, of the 33rd degree, of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite Freemasonry of the Southern jurisdiction of the United States of America, and at present is under the direct supervision of the Grand Commander John H. Cowles, 33 degrees, with Acting Secretary General C.F. Knight Keefe, Honorary Business Manager. So anyways, let's move on through this New Age magazine and see what it says. They have a statue here of Frederick. This majestic figure is a gift to the United States from the former German emperor. Stands at the U.S. Army College in Washington, D.C. Frederick, an enthusiastic Mason, was raised August 14th, 1738, in an emergency lodge held at Brunswick. So they have this at the U.S. Army College, his statue, Frederick the Great, who was an emperor. It's kind of important. Emperors and kings and pharaohs and Caesars, and you know, with this New Age, return to the New Age here, as I keep saying, New Age for who? Return to the Golden Age. For the masters or the slaves? What's going on in the world right now with the Middle East and all the other shenanigans going on? Okay, here we go. Hope you like my outdoor video. It is exceedingly difficult to secure accurate information concerning Masonic conditions in Germany. Our Masonic friends there notify us some time ago not to write them as Masons, as this would be dangerous to them. This was 1934, and World War II started around 1940, so that would have been 6 years away. Moving on down, as you know how I do this, I highlight things when I read it, and then I just read some of it for you, so that you can see that it is not me telling you what to think or my opinion, but my book reviews from books I read, that I read to you. Okay, moving on. It relates, among other things, to the persecution, both by word of mouth and by public press, of which German Masons are subjected. It further states that the Führer, in January of this year, expressed himself by stating that no harm should come to the old Prussian Grand Lodge nor their membership. So the Führer was going to protect the people of the old Prussian Grand Lodge. Okay, moving on. The Honolulu, Hawaii bodies of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry will celebrate their 60th anniversary. Wow, this is 1934, so if we go back, that's like 1860. During the week of October 15th. It is well known that King Kamehameha, a Hawaiian name, Kamehameha, was a member of the craft. Again, I wonder, is Freemasonry a craft? Is it similar to witchcraft? It is also well known that John Q. Dominos, the husband of Queen I love these Hawaiian names, Lailaiukehani, was a member of the Scottish Rite and had been honored with the 33rd degree. Moving on, the Supreme Council, ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, Northern Masonic jurisdiction, held its 122nd annual meeting at the Grand Rapids, Michigan, September 25, 26, and 27. DeWitt Clinton. I always like it when these names pop up, like President Bill Clinton. DeWitt Clinton Consistory of that city. So they named it Consistory after Mr. Clinton in so well, I bet he's related. What do you want to bet? Anyways, the city was a host to members of the council and their ladies, and headquarters and meeting rooms at the Hotel Pantlin. And I'm not reading everything, I'm just reading some highlight issues that point out certain facts. One fact is that these Masonic lodges and people are everywhere and into everything. It is up to the president. Education and other groups fairly representative of the great cross-section of our people. This is about education. It is up to the president. Education and other groups fairly representative of the great cross-section of our people met in Washington, of our people. Masonic members involved in the education of the people, the children of the USA. And I imagine they're doing the propaganda with educating the adults too, into to think the way they want them to think. And I've seen evidence that in these magazines they talk about it. Anyways, our people met in Washington last spring and made an appeal to Congress and the president through committee members for federal aid to stricken public schools. 1934 now. Some took the wise position that were better to make no appropriation than to open the U.S. Treasury to the support of private education. They did not want any of the Catholic schools, i.e. other religious schools, to have any of the government money. They wanted to keep religion out of the schools. Got it? You're gonna get it. We'll take a pause and give you a little interruption of why you should get it. Sometimes some of the material I present here in my videos may be a little bit hard to believe, but I don't make this stuff up and you can look it up. For example, this article was in the press release yesterday. Apparently, a 14-year-old, William Bear, had encountered some eyebrow-raising policies and practices during his children's years in public school. This was a press release on May 5th. You can see right there, 2014. But he had seen some things when his kids were going to public school. But he still wasn't prepared for what he discovered last Wednesday night. That was the night Bear learned that his 14-year-old daughter had been assigned to read a novel that contains a passage so sexually explicit that he described it as pornographic. Now remember, these Masonic people in this book, what does it say here? Some took the wise position that it were better to make no appropriation than to open the U.S. Treasury to the support of private education. They wanted to keep the religion out of the school. And here, the 14-year-old daughter, in May 2014, had been assigned to read a novel that contains a passage so sexually explicit that he described it as pornographic. The novel, 19 Minutes, by Jodi Picoult, is a controversial book that tells the story of a fictional school shooting. Now, we've had a lot of school shootings lately, and the people it affects. Though the book had been part of the curriculum in New Hampshire Guilford's High School since 2007. Wow, that many years, and the kids didn't tell their parents, or nobody brought it up. And that's the problem I want to point out too. People know things are wrong, like 911 was obviously not done by some guys with some box cutters. But nobody wants to raise their fist up and say we need to find out the truth. Oklahoma City bombing, where all the kids in the daycare were killed, the Boston bombing, the Sandy Hook. There's too many strange things going on. So that's why I'm doing these videos. I'm using real live published material on current events. Anyways, when it was assigned last Monday, school officials gave no notice to parents of freshman English students that the book was being read or of the novel's sexually explicit content. And Bear tells EAG News he became aware of the book's objectionable material purely by chance. A family friend was visiting last Monday and talking to Bear's 14-year-old daughter about how things were going at school when she mentioned that she had just been assigned a novel, and the friend picked up the book and casually opened it to page 313, which contains a very graphic description of a sexual encounter between two adolescents. The friend was aghast as he read the passage and asked Bear if he was aware of the book's content. I was shocked when I read the passage. Not much shocks me anymore, Bear says. My wife was stunned by the increasing graphic nature of the sexual content of the scene and the imagery it evoked. Here's an excerpt of the explicit passage, and then I'll move on back to the other book. Relax, Matt murmured, and then he sank his teeth into her shoulder. He pinned her hands over her head and ground his hips into hers. She could feel his erection hot against her stomach. She couldn't remember ever feeling so heavy, as if her heart were beating between her legs. She clawed at Matt's back to bring him even closer. Yeah, he groaned. Well, you get the point. I don't need to read it. So, over here in 1934, they want to keep religion out of the school. And here you can see what's been in the school system. And there was another thing here I wanted to show you that I showed you in the last video. I wanted to remind you. And that is, things are getting so out of hand. And in this book here is a little bit more about George Washington. But if you look at George Washington here, you can see his fingers. 2 fingers. And you can see on his chair is the 6-pointed star of the Temple of Solomon, which is, has a circle with a circle inside. That's the sun god, if you know that. The sun with the moon in front of it is a circle with a circle inside. And anyways, you see George Washington with his 2 fingers. And we talked yesterday on my other video that I made about the statue of Satan they're putting up at the Capitol in Oklahoma. They want to put up at the Capitol. And it was a press release also dated yesterday And I like how they say it was done by the public, that they had gathered a crowd together to get the money. A crowd of whom, we might ask. So let's get back to the book. So they want to put up a statue of Satan. They don't want religious in schools. We know what they're teaching the kids. And they want to put in... George Washington's doing the same thing, whatever that means, that the devil is doing. Okay, let's move back to the book. Our frontispiece is devoted this month to the eminent German Mason, one who perhaps did more for the craft in the fatherland than any other person, Frederick the Great. In this same issue, we are carrying an article concerning Germany of the old imperial days, before the Holocaust, known as World War. That would have been World War I. Before they had World War II, they always called it World War because it was the only world war at that time. It is with genuine regret that we review the present situation in Germany with respect to the Masonry. It is indeed sad that a nation that has in years gone by contributed so richly to the Masonic Lodge and action should now, in this enlightened day, repudiate the great craft. Are they repudiating witchcraft? And treat with disdain its distinguished representatives. Mason, naturally, the fraternity cannot thrive under a dictatorship. Why? Because fundamentally, Masonry means equality between men, means enlightenment, liberty of speech, action, and freedom. Well, like I continue to say, I think some of the stuff here is speaketh with forked tongue, because they say that, and then the other places in here, well, they want to keep religion out of school, and they think that only they should be administrative in running things, because the common man like you and I are profane. And they also want to push the freedom to worship the God of one chooses. Well, I can't help but say, was this what they were fighting for? Isn't that what George Washington was doing? He was a high-level Mason. So when they say they want us to worship the God that we choose, are they setting the stage to bring in Luciferianism, as it says in the Bible? What do I know? I'm just connecting the dots. All right, Grand Commander Albert Junod recently announced the 10th National Convention of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Switzerland. So again, my reason for doing these New Age books is to show that they are endeavoring to do many things all over the world, and they are doing many things, and they are all over the world. It was necessary to hold the convention at that time due to the vicious attacks to which Masonry had been recently the object. So they're holding the convention in Switzerland because they can't hold it in Germany, I suppose. We have now known that in war times they made large profits, apparently unconscionable ones. In peace times, comparatively modest profits, but yet enough to pay handsome dividends. So we all know they have wars, and they keep the wars going because the big corporate structures are making lots of money. The American inventive genius has contributed greatly to the modern war materials and machinery. I'm not so sure that's a good thing. But what we, as American citizens, did not know was the distance this industry, as it now seems, had been carried along vicious and dangerous paths in the mad international scramble for business. By way of illustration, it is now not known to the public that our government agents are aiding in the sale of American munitions that our Navy and military commissioners to foreign friendly nations were indirectly advertising and promoting the sale of our war materials. Who would have thunk that? The corporate industry is more interested in making money on weapons than improvements for the modern world for the U.S. citizenry, just like they are in 2014 in this day and age, trying to get 14-year-old girls to read pornographic material and many other insidious things like Miley Cyrus riding a wrecking ball naked that your kids can look up on TV. And the cartoons. Do you ever sit down and watch your kids' cartoons? If you do, and you listen to the words, you won't let them watch it because it's mind control, it's propaganda. Very nasty stuff. That our military secrets were pawns to be used in our munitions or submarine manufacturers in creating business. That treaties were being violated and smuggling engaged in this wildly competitive game, and that peace was being decried and war extolled when our neighbors were at each other's throats. So, this was 6 years prior to World War II, and they were getting ready and arming up, which, by the way, they're getting ready and arming up and for the last few years for World War III, so it clearly seems to me. Speaking of that, I hate to say this, but we have one more little press release to go over. That's just too much to believe. It seems that in the news yesterday, there was a U.S. media covers up mass murder in Odessa. Yesterday, this is May 5th, 2014, in Odessa, Ukraine, more than 30 anti-Kiev protesters were burned alive as a U.S.-backed pro-Kiev mob set fire to the trade union building into which they ran to escape the pro-Kiev crowd. So anti-Kievs were running from the pro-Kiev, K-I-E-V crowd. It was the largest loss of life in Ukraine since the U.S.-backed coup in February, and it may be the turning point in the East versus the West struggle that ensued. Okay, so they're a bunch of, they're like Republicans and Democrats, or USA citizens and Mexicans. Anyways, one party ran 30 other people into a building. The pictures from the scene were ghastly, as desperate protesters tried to claw their way out of the building as they were burned alive. So the people who ran, the big crowd that ran them in the building, set the building on fire and toasted them. Also ghastly were the photos of young girls happily making Molotov cocktails that were thrown into the building. So, I thought I would show you the picture of the young girls posted on tweeters, I guess, who made the bottles of gasoline or kerosene, the Molotov cocktails. Don't they look happy and proud of what they're doing and throwing the bottles of Molotov cocktails at the buildings, burning people alive? Look at what they tweeted. They took pictures of themselves. Sorry about the wind there. So again, you know, what kind of... If these Masonic Freemasons run the world, what are they stirring up now? And if they were arming up back then, 6 years prior to World War II, and we know they're arming up now, it's been in the news. So, moving back to my 1934 issue of the New Age magazine, keeping out of the war. During the recent threatening situation in Austria, the cry of our clergy, statesmen, and press is, stay out of it. The same cry was heard in 1914. Mr. Wilson was re-elected in 1916. So with the slogan, he kept us out of war. But how different it was in the spring of 1917. So what's interesting is the first 4 years of Obama's term, he kept us out of the war. And now that he's re-elected, will this same story happen? Lest we forget, it is not appropriate to review Mark Twain's comment on war from The Mysterious Stranger, written many years before World War. There has never been a just one, nor an honorable one, on the part of the instigator of the war. I can see 1,000,000 years ahead, and this rule will never change in so many as half a dozen instances. The loud little handful, as usual, will shout for the war. The pulpit will warily and cautiously object at first. The great, big, dull bulk of the nation will rub its sleepy eyes and try to make out why there should be a war, and will say earnestly and indignantly, "It is unjust and dishonorable, and there is no necessity for it." Then the handful will shout louder. A few fair men on the other side will argue and reason against the war with speech and pen, and at first that will have a hearing and be applauded. But it will not last long. Those others will outshout them, and presently the anti-war audiences will thin out and lose popularity. Before long you will see this curious thing: the speakers stoned from the platform, the free speech strangled by hordes of furious men who in their secret hearts are still at one with those stoned speakers, as earlier, but do not dare to say so. The whole nation, pulpit and all, will take up the war cry and shout itself hoarse. And any mob of honest man who ventures to open his mouth will be present, and presently mouths will cease to open. Next, the statement will invent cheap lies, putting the blame upon the nation that is attacked. And every man will be glad for those conscience-shooting falsities, and will diligently study them, and refuse to examine any refutations of them. And thus he will by and by convince himself that war is just, and will thank God for the better sleep he enjoys after this process of grotesque self-deception. Seems like that's what we're doing these days in the world now. Alright, I'll just take one more part here, and I think I'll take a break. Okay, here we go. The Usefulness of Masonry. 1934 edition of the New Age magazine, published by the Freemasons. Masonry is an institution that is adapted to all people and to all times. When we speak of its universal reality, we have reference to this adaptability rather than to its diffusion over the face of the earth. While Masons may be found in every corner and every clime, yet there is not a person anywhere who could not with profit assume its obligations and follow its tenets. That is because it is founded and built upon ideas that are of the highest of which the human mind can conceive. That's their craft. And again I ask, is it witchcraft? All I can say, that's George Washington with the two fingers. This is the statue they want to put up in Oklahoma City's Capitol building. So I'll let you ponder it, and I'm taking a break. Well, hello, I'm back. May 8th, Thursday, 2014, Rick Miracle here in the mountains of North Carolina. Continuing on with the video I started yesterday. The New Age Freemasonry Publication Magazine edition, published in 1934, price 15 cents. Well, we have a very interesting topic. I'm kind of excited to share with you. It's kind of crazy and interesting. That's what we finished yesterday. And here on the other flip page is George Washington. Shadowland. So apparently on the hillside near the Potomac River in Northern Virginia, this Mason went there to visit the George Washington property, and he wanted to visit this historic spot at night. and leaving the river, I went to the tomb. There was not a sound. The moon smiled down upon me, as if indulgent upon my whim. With head uncovered, I stood without the sacred sepulchre, now in the shadow and outlined against the sky. Sepulchre, S-E-P-U-L-C-H-A-R. As I gazed, a soft light appeared within. It was not, I knew, made of human hands, for it was of that iridescent such as was made by the glowworm. As I gazed in wonderment at the light expanded, and suddenly out of the air it seemed, a tall figure stood without the gate, dressed in the fashion of the colonial days. He looked at the half-moon, then at the sky, and then seeing me asked, "Who is it that comes here?" Instinctively I approached and stood erect, making known the fact that I was a Master Mason. Remember, this is 1934. This gave me a full view of his face. It was not the face of Washington, as it painted by Stuart and other artists. It was more rugged, more virile, more like the work of Houdin, the French sculptor. The face of the man who had seen arduous service in the French and Indian wars, the man who had seen Braddock fall, the man who had had horses shot from under him in battle. "You are of the craft, I see," said George Washington, I suppose. I added that part. "Yes, worshipful master, I answered. "You are very kind. But it can hardly be said that I am now to be considered that." "In the hearts of your brethren," I replied, "you will always be considered the master of all of us." So it is not just me continuing to throw my point of view. It's from my reading lots of material that I say that they think that George Washington is the master of all of us. He smiled and bowed. I observed that I am addressing a diplomat. "What of my brethren? How have they progressed? We in Shadowland." Remember, this title of this is Shadowland. "We in Shadowland do not know what is going on with you." I guess he's talking about the Masonic people on Earth. In astonishment, I asked, "You do not know anything about we humans?" And George Washington says, No, it would not be best. In Shadowland, we are happy, very happy. If we could look down and know what is going on, if we could see the troubles of man and nations, if we knew the mistakes that were being made by dear ones, if we knew of sufferings, we would ourselves suffer, for we could not help. It is best that we do not know. I told him how Masonry had grown, that in the United States alone there are over 3 million Master Masons. Wow, 3 million Master Masons. And people don't think there's an Illuminati or a New World Order or a conspiracy going on. What are 3 million Master Masons in 1934 doing in the United States? According to the New Age magazine published by the Freemasons. There are blue lodges in the Arctic, in Japan, China, and India, South America, and Africa, and also throughout Europe. Save these countries were owing to political troubles. It had been suppressed. "But not for long," said General Washington. "Liberty cannot be suppressed. Liberty is eternal." In this country, I informed him, there were about 500,000 members of the Scottish Rite in 1934. I added that part. At this, he looked puzzled. "The Scottish Rite? I do not know of that order." I told him that it was an order composed of Blue Lodge Masons, and that its philosophers were borrowed from the great minds of the ages. and it was always searching for the lost word, and also worshiping the goodness of God. He looked at me thoughtfully and said, "Sometimes I think the lost word is truth." Well, let me take a break. Sorry about that. I work from home, and when the phone rings, I have to answer it if I want to make any money. Anyways, back to this. I told him that it was an order composed of Blue Lodge Masons, Scottish Rite, and that its philosophies were borrowed from the great minds of the ages, and it was always searching for the lost word, and also worshiping the goodness of God. He looked at me thoughtfully and said, "Sometimes I think the lost word is truth." That's where we left off when I was talking before. This is the greatest pearl of life. While I lived, Masonry was a great comfort to me. At times I was surrounded by enemies. I put my faith in those who were Master Masons, and that faith was never betrayed. George Washington's talking. But I would like to hear more of my country. How has it progressed? What of its people? What happened after I left for Shadowland? Shadowland? Where is Shadowland? Is that where you go when you die? What of the Constitution? Has it stood the test of time? We of today know of your services in the Constitutional Convention. The Diary of Madison was found and published 50 years after his death. George Washington says, "Madison, he was a very young then, but learned, dependable, and studious. And there was Franklin, so wise and experienced and so humble. Hamilton was brilliant, but impetuous. There were great minds in that convention, the very pick of the colonies. I thought we builded well. We did not always agree. We had to compromise. It is sometimes better to do that. We could not determine the slave question. I was afraid of the future, because it might bring war between the states. Was there a civil war? Yes, I answered, a terrible war. The South tried to succeed." I could read all this, but it will be forever, so I'll just skip over to this. Then they talk about the Great War. George Washington says, "The Great War?" And he goes, "Yes, Germany, Australia were fighting France and Great Britain." A lot of people don't know why the World War I was fought. I'm sure there are many reasons, but the largest one was Britain was called the United Kingdom, and Germany was growing, and Austria, in leaps and bounds. They were great machinists, and they had lots of mines, and they were making trains and tracks and all kinds of other modern appliances and equipment back there in the early 1900s. Great Britain was sliding back, and Germany was moving forward with its expansionism and growth in the world. So to nip that in the bud, France and Great Britain went to war with Germany and Austria. And from the way I understand it, is the United States wanted to stay neutral. If anything, it was siding with Germany. But anyways, the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, the Freemasonic societies, the Illuminati, promised Great Britain they would use their vast wealth if after the World War I was over, supported by the Illuminati, Rothschild, Rockefellers, Morgans, Chases, Schiffs, all those people, that the Palestinian land would be given to the Rothschilds to start the Zionist state of Israel. And Zionism means to rule the world from Mount Zion, which is in Israel near Jerusalem. So, and that was called the Balfour Agreement, B-A-L-F-O-U-R, if you want to look it up. So anyways, the United States stood aloof, just like I said, until its ships were ruthlessly sunk on the high seas. Just like 9/11 and all the other incidences in the world. They create these incidences to stir up the people to get them to go along with the war. So I wouldn't be surprised if the good guys actually blew up our ship and blamed it on the other guys. Anyways, you get the point. We joined the Allies at a time when their strength was exhausted and they had no more manpower and no more money. From the time of the Civil War, millions upon millions of immigrants had come to this country from the countries of Europe. The question was whether or not we could absorb them. The answer was the draft, which impartially selected those capable of being soldiers. We sent an army of 5 million men to France. This turned the tide and the Allies were victorious. 10 million men were killed. The General, George Washington, shook his head sadly. If the majority of mankind were Masons, there would be no more war. I answered that this was true, that the King of England, the Tsar of Russia, the King of Italy were not Masons, nor were the German Kaiser. Said Washington, enough of wars, tell me more of the Scottish Rite. And so far as proper, what is taught in your degrees? With that said, I'd like to move on to something interesting here. John Quincy Adams wrote a book. He was the President of the United States, a past president, of course. Graduated from Harvard University in 1787. And I just want to say, he wrote a book, Letters on Freemasonry. And he warned about Freemasonry. Back then, there wasn't the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. There was the Mason Party and the Anti-Mason Party. And from my studies, I have discovered that the Anti-Mason Party were, in essence, I suppose, the Christians. And then so that would make the Freemason Party the anti-Christians. And let me not say it. Let John Quincy Adams say it. It says here, if he needed any additional justification, it was the tragic murder of Captain William Morgan in the state of New York in the years 1826. That further heightened Adams' sense of urgency to warn of the dangers of Masonic Lodge. Morgan, an ex-Mason, had revealed some of the secrets of the Masons. The oaths, handshakes, ritual trappings. In retaliation, he was ritually murdered in a particularly gruesome manner and his lifeless, mutilated body abandoned in a lake. So when you get initiated into Masonry, you are blindfolded and half naked, and a noose is around your neck like a leash, and a dagger is put to your chest, and you swear on a Bible you'll keep the secrets. And if you don't, they'll cut your throat, stick your tongue out through it, and they spill your guts and throw you up on the shoreline to let your body list back and forth with the tide. Nice, huh? So you can see I read this book on my tabs, and I could go through here, but we'll do a video on it. And there's another thing I came across here yesterday. I ordered some magazines from Australia, Nexus magazines, and this is the February-March 2013 edition. I ordered them at the end of the year because they're from Australia. So this is 2014. I get all 6 in the mail. I got these the other day. And I saw this little article pertains to what we're talking about. There on the bottom. Pirates and Templars. It's a book review like I do, but it's in Nexus magazine. Pirates and the Lost Templar Fleet. The name of the book is Pirates and the Lost Templar Fleet by David Hatcher Childers. The secret Navy wars between the Templars and the Vatican. Author Childress takes us on a fascinating world of maverick sea captains who were Knights Templars and the later Scottish Rite Freemasons. So coincidence that this was here and I noticed it. Who battled the Vatican and the Spanish and Italian ships that sailed for the Pope. Again, my conclusion after reading all these books, and John Quincy Adams, back then, instead of Republicans and Democrats, it was Masonic politic party and anti-Masonic politic party. And finally, after they killed Morgan, and did some other dastardly deeds back then in the early 1800s, the Mason Party swore they would never allow any non-Masons into the political arena again. That's why John Kerry is a Mason, George Bush is a Mason, Obama is a Mason. They're all Masons, and we'll get into that in a minute. So anyways, oops, sorry. Pardon the interruption. So it is kind of crazy that here in the Nexus magazine that there was this article that was fortuitous to our conversation. And the Knights Templars, who were later the Scottish Free Rite Masons, who battled the Vatican, the Spanish, the Italian ships, and then sailed for the Pope. Later, this fleet of ships and the new ones to come flew the skull and bones, the symbol of the Knights Templar, that preyed on the ships of the Vatican coming from the rich ports of the Americas, and were ultimately known as the Pirates of the Caribbean. So what are we saying here? All these Masonic lodges everywhere are pirates? They're not Christians, and they already talk about a different kind of God. So I thought I'd go do my little picture thing before I end this little part of this book. And again, I want to point out George Washington, his naked chest, as you see, and his finger pointing up, as you see. You will notice that, the magician here points up and points down, and see the 5-pointed star on the table. So there's just a lot of weird coincidences. The naked chest, the hand pointing up, the hand pointing down, the devil, and the hand sign, and the moon in the background, and the flames on his stomach. The devil with the hand up and hand down pointing. The snake on the stomach. The star on his head. George Washington and all the other presidents that are Masons. Remember I said that back then with John Quincy Adams' book, that they vowed never to allow non-Masons into politics in the United States again. Notice the all-seeing eye on the top of this. See the eye? See the planet? These are your so-called worldwide New World Order organization. Again, when I showed you a picture of the statue of Satan being put up in Oklahoma in the city capitol, I kept saying, look at the children looking at the statue. And they always have children. There's George Washington, his April, and the children. Apparently this is the god Moloch. And look at the children they're throwing in the fire. So they throw the children in the fire. And this is the Bohemian Grove picture that Alex Jones went in there and took a video, and they threw a child into a burning fire under a giant owl. And they photographed a lot of presidents and politicians like Kissinger and CEOs of ABC, TV stations, airlines, Masons, I suppose, doing their rituals. So another interesting picture here. From darkness to light. There's the all-seeing eye. And is Lucifer the light bearer? And we know they want a new world order. This one says Global Freemasonry. You can find this up by looking up Freemasonry images on the Yahoo Images site or Google Images site, and you'll see all these images. So when I look at the images, I look at the different symbols. This is the George Washington Monument with the big Masonic symbol out front. See it on the front lawn? The George Washington. The obelisk, which is the phallic symbol for the god worship of Isis and Osiris and their son Horus, which is represented by the all-seeing eye. The George Washington Monument. The Eye of Moloch. Remember, even George Washington and all the other pictures had an eye. Moloch is this dude. Notice the star. This is a religion to these people, if you don't know that. Notice the chain on the man and the woman, the horns on their bodies. And I suppose when they have a sacrifice, it's a feast, and they like to feast on people. It's usually when they have the witchcraft or the sacrifices, they have sex with the victim to raise the serotonin in the body or some kind of spiritual energy before they killed them, and then drink the blood. I don't make these pictures. I'll go look up Moloch images on the internet. And here appears to be the Moloch dude in distress. He's got the all-seeing eye on his chest, chains on his arms. I just wonder if he's saying, "Feed me some more kids." Maybe adults today. I'm really hungry. These images on the, like I said, Yahoo image website or a Google image website are just, they're collections of images other people find in other places over the years. Who knows, this might be 200 years old, 500-year-old image. And what they're doing, what I said with the kids and the sex and all that, of course, we're all familiar with. Look at her hands. Hollywood is full of magic. And I don't need to tell you all the stuff they're putting on TV, and including the cartoons your kids watch. So let me get back to my book here, and I appreciate you letting me meander around. Get you some current events. So let's finish Washington, and then I'll be done for a little while. Washington nodded his head in approval. These are great and beautiful teachings. But tell me, has the Scottish Rite acted in any way for the public good? Well, we know they want to keep religion out of schools, and they want more Miley Cyruses, and they worship that God that likes to eat people, so let's see what he says here. Yes, I said eagerly. It is most active in supporting the idea that there should be a Secretary of Education in the Cabinet of the President. There is a Secretary of War, of Navy, of Treasury, of Commerce, of Labor, and of Agriculture, but there is no Department of Education. They were pursuing this, and like I said, in these books I read to you, it keeps coming up that they were very focused on getting their fist around the education systems and control of children. Why? Well, you saw Miley Cyrus. How strange, reflected Washington, that there should be a department giving advice upon the best way to raise cows, and horses, and even hogs, but no department to give advice upon the education of the young. See how insidious the propaganda is? Did you actually think this is a ghost of George Washington talking to this guy? This is all mind control propaganda. Leading people down the garden path. Apparently the people of our country have not yet learned that the child of today is the citizen of tomorrow, and that this is a government of the people by the people. Deceived people. So with a deceived government. Even in my time, the national government endeavored to establish schools. We then realized that the public school is the very foundation of national life. All right, moving on. Worshipful Mastifer. That's the guy talking to George Washington. You take an interest in children. I have not yet told you about the shrine. The shrine? He asked. The ancient Arabic order, Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. A lot of people don't know the Shriners are into the Masonic lodges in Freemasonry, just like the Rosicrucians and pretty much everything that's organized in the world is connected to this big, one of the legs of the spider or the tentacles of the octopus. The ancient order, Arabic order, nobles of the mystic shrine. It is the playground of Masonry. We realize the truth of the saying that men are but children of larger growth. True, said the general. Is the shrine ever serious? Anyways, I'll take a break, and I guess next we'll do a little bit about Bill Cody. And how much more is there to do here on this one that I highlighted? Not too much. Thank you. I'll be back. Alright, so let's see what happens with a forceful character. Colonel William F. Cody, Buffalo Bill. Remember, this was written in this magazine, 1934. One thing I've noticed, a lot of the popular people, politicians, leaders, CEOs, presidents, even movie stars, people, characters that have been written about that are so great. It seems that, could be all, but at least a very high 90% plus or minus are all Masons. They build their Masonic characters up. So moving on, with that said, he carried dispatchers 100 miles for General Sheridan through terrific fire of Indians and returned with perfect safety. So it says here, after this nice write-up about Buffalo Bill, Masonry embodies, the title is called The Craft, as you can see. And I keep saying, is it witchcraft? Because we know they're into occultic, which means secret science, magic. Masonry embodies and teaches the truth. So I guess the truth would be the secrets of magic, witchcraft. Some of it. It teaches so much of philosophy, theology, science, art, physics, and here we go, metaphysics. That's beyond physics, magic. Anthropology and psychology, which are of such intrinsic value and so helpful to mankind for right living, understanding, and good fellowship, that we believe every good, intelligent citizen would want to belong to so good and great a fraternity if he only knew of its merits and could. Our Albert Arthur Riggs, KT, 32-degree Mason, wrote that. So I know when they recruit a lot of young people into the Masonic lodges, they have great hopes of opportunities, financial knowledge, but a lot of it's never comes to fruition. And they talk about Germany in the imperial days. I can't read all of this to you, but as I keep saying, you can go onto a used book site and find these New Age magazines published by the Freemasons. Here's one, Observation of the World. To begin with, what is a word? In the Protestant edition of the Bible, the Gospel according to St. John opens by saying, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was with God." That's what it says here, twice. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. Anyways, moving on. Thus we get the idea conveyed to us that in the beginning, all things in our universe, there was the thought, the desire, and the intent of God to create, that this thought, this desire, and this intent came from God, and as it was part of Him, then it was also God, or if you prefer the word deistic, like a deity, or prefer the word deity. As there was nothing but God in the beginning, then everything that was created by Him came from Him and was Him. So if you don't believe in God, well, listen to all that. Having now arrived at what is meant by the use of word, we have but to substitute the name Hiram for that of God. So, Hiram was the king that was helping King Solomon build King Solomon's temple. And the King Hiram called on his magician, also named Hiram, to come assist with building King Solomon's temple. And if you know anything about King Solomon and the Hebrews and the Kabbalah, magic, Madonna's into the Kabbalah, Hollywood's all into the psychic and magic and occultism, and the ritual sex and the sacrificing of people. Anyways, so Hiram was the magician called by King Hiram to come help build King Solomon's temple. And I'm sure the temple had to be of such intricate measurements and designs to be of magical value. Just like when a witch's circle is the big star with the circle inside, and then they get inside and light candles and they can call forth demons. Everything has to be of perfect scientific dimensions and shapes. Hey, I just studied this stuff and report to you. Okay, so Hiram for that of God, and we cannot see that one meaning of that part of our ritual or drama of Hiram is that the master's word was the thought, the desire, the intent, the philosophy of the master. So when you are a witch or a magician and you do incantations and you say things and you have different powders and shapes and fires, whatever you create, I suppose you manifest. So that would involve witchcraft words, manifest something. Like God created the world in 6 days and all that. That would be a manifestation. God's power of magic. Just throwing my 2 cents in there. So the people who are into witchcraft and magicianry, and apparently what the Freemasons teach, only special adepts who rise to the certain level and prove themselves worthy. Regrettably, I consider the value of worthy are people who will go along with satanic activities and behavior, even killing people, sacrificing people, robbing people. If you're a person that would not agree to these things, then obviously you would not be let in on the inside of the Masonic, Freemasonic, and other groups and cults out there. You would not get on the inside and know the secrets. You might wind up on a table being sacrificed and eaten, but there you go. There is passed down to us a tradition, for it is not so stated in the ritual, that the word which was lost truly defined deity, and that we are told that by his death there was also lost the genuine secrets of the Master Mason. I'm only reading this stuff. That's my job. You can put your 2 cents what you think about it yourself. I know what I think. I think there's a lot going on they don't tell us. Masonry in Portugal. The idea persists, and it is carefully nourished, that Portuguese Masonry is secretly in league with and supporting Republican political clique. Masons, in the United States, they got control of the Republicans and they got control of the Democrats. Everybody knows that. Obama's a Mason, Bush is a Mason, Kerry's a Mason, they're all Masons. Or members of other clubs that are controlled by the Masons, Heritage Foundations, Club of Rome, Council of Foreign Relations, Rosicrucians, Ford Foundation, Carnegie Foundation. There's a book this thick I have, just of all the organizations. And it says, beware of the rainbow, because the rainbow is a symbol for all the occultic activity, which is also the symbol for the gay groups. Masons are looked upon as revolutionists, and the government has adopted a policy of rigor prosecution. So that's what the Portuguese Masons are looked upon as revolutionists. The Portuguese Masonic Constitution forbids any collective political action part of the Masonry. Why would they forbid it unless it was a problem? Now it is an indisputable fact that Masonic leaders and the heads of the Republican League are all of democratic ideas, both socialist and liberal. With that said, people should know that The Illuminati is basically the top of the pyramid. Then you move slowly down, you get to the Communist Party, the Zionist Party, the Socialist Party, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. They conquer and divide. They want people in different camps, and they want them to be fighting each other instead of looking up at the snake who's really orchestrating the program, the Lucifer worship. Now, it is an indisputable fact that Masonic leaders and the heads of the Republican Party are all of democratic ideas, both socialist and liberal. See what I told you? And dictatorship of the Masonry, and it is best explanation of the persecutions which have arrived at the doors of the Masonic temples. So they call their buildings temples. Temples are churches. And so they control the state. They are of a particular religious order, so there is a mixture of church and state, but they're trying to only have it their church and state, which is the Lucifer worship, which is anti-Christian, and they want the Christian religion out. I don't have to repeat this too many times, do I? The sovereign Grand Commander of the Supreme Council and ex-president of the Republic is in exile in Spain. So the ex-president of Portugal is in Spain. Portuguese Masons have been scattered and forced to submit to the most rigid surveillance. In the United States, they're surveilling on all of us, instead of at this time that the government was surveilling on them. The liberals were in the city, the conservatives in the country. Sounds like today. The conflicting elements kept them from following any set of policy. The conflicting elements kept them from following any set policy and took all the vigor and consistency out of their actions. That's what they do today. Everybody's so stressed out and freaked out by all the things going on, they're not focused on what's really going on. By the way, how do you like my backyard? I make this video for people who are like you, who are watching it. I don't know who you are, but I'm just trying to share information. There's no big corporation making this video. It's just me and my little tablet that I made a little stand for that records the video. And I thought it'd be cool to do something outside instead of in the living room. So there's not a lot of expense here and no big budget. I like to read and I like to share what I read. Old factions of the Republican Party were yearning to be back in the saddle. The monarchists dreamed of control of the state and the establishment, so there are a lot of people who have dreams of bigger than you and I do, trying to run the world, I guess. Monarchy, and if that were not possible, an oligarchy, and they were encouraged by these thoughts by influencing plutocrats and the clergy. During the first years of the dictatorship, the expenses of the state were greatly increased, and many of the old and valuable services were discontinued by imprudent reforms. Many incapable men infested the government departments. 1934. Sounds like 2014. Get my 19s and 2000s mixed up. At present, the dictatorship of Salazar is very much like that of Austria. Subordination to the Vatican, to the fascists, and full of ultra-nationalism, all of which constitute a danger to democracy, liberty, and Masonry, it says here. So the Vatican and fascism was a danger to democracy, liberty, and Masonry. The time is a troubled one for the Portuguese Masonry, but in spite of it all, they are still organized. Today, regularly working under the obedience of the Supreme Council of the 7 consistories, 22 Areopagi, whatever that is, 38 chapters, 66 symbolic lodges, 35 triangular circles, which are spread throughout the Portuguese territory in Europe, Azores, Madeira, Cape Verde, St. Thomas, Antalo, Massacumbumbe, whatever that is. Concerning the work, it is not possible at this time to give any information. However, Portuguese Masonry is doing its duty, its patriotism, in this time of trial, and is well worthy of the glorious traditions. The Scottish Rite Bodies of Hawaii will celebrate its 60th anniversary of the granting of the Charter of the Honolulu Lodge of Perfection during the week of October 20th. Over here, communism conquered the famous New England consciousness when in 1838, John Humphrey Knowles founded his sect of perfectionists of Bible communists, often dubbed the Free Lovers. Sometimes a law clerk, he abandoned the practice of law for the exercise of religion in the form of what he deemed the primitive Christian idea. All property was communal, and bigamy was committed in a big way. The true believers, holding that the indications of the Holy Spirit were to be followed in all things, nothing being good or bad in itself, all prayer and religious services were stopped. Sunday was unobserved, as were the common conventions. Well, they're telling you a little bit about their communism. The followers of Islam, God's prophets and apostles, are principality Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. But the greatest was, they say, Muhammad. And we all know that. Well, we're almost done here. World politics. Among the significant events of the past few months, the admission of Russia to the full membership of the League of Nations stands out as marking the beginning of a new epoch of international relations. As we know, the League of Nations failed, and then after World War II, they had the United Nations. So they couldn't get the League of Nations to do what they wanted, so now they threw that apart, and now they built the United Nations, and apparently the United Nations is doing everything these people want, including Agenda 21, the treaty trying to take the United States people's guns, the billion-dollar homosexual program worldwide, and also to complete acceptance of bisexuality and other decadent behavior, and trying to do away with marriage and any kind of Christianity and religion in the world, all to bring about, I don't know, you tell me. It secures a new peace realignment in Europe and Asia, under which France, Italy, Great Britain, and Russia are expected to stand together against any general war threat. 1934. League of Nations didn't work. They had World War II in 1940. Defiantly and consciously, it is a reply to the recent German and Japanese withdrawal from the League. As such, it should greatly strengthen the position of the peace groups in Berlin and Tokyo in their effort to restrain the German and Japanese militarists. Remember, it said here before in this magazine earlier that the United States was supplying weapons to countries all over the world. See, I don't like half-truths. They're calling Germans and Japanese militarists, and earlier in this magazine, they were saying that the United States was selling military weapons to countries all over the world. So they were all militarists. And I keep saying they're all run by one single entity, and they're controlling the two factions to create the war, to create the big financial boondoggle, where they make a bunch of money and we all die. With proper indignation, the self-righteous great powers, Britain, France, and Italy, pointedly reminded Poland that she has accepted their minority and other treaties in exchange for independence. Down here, on the other hand, there is no real justice in subjecting Poland and certain other more recently established countries to supervision and regulation from which the older and larger countries were free. A lot of the wars we have now, if people don't know it, after World War I, a lot of, like you just said here, a lot of new countries were created, and a lot of old countries, the territorial lines were destroyed and the leadership taken down. So as years went by, the people who were in charge, or the people who had the old country, were trying to reestablish their old country and do away with what was created. So this happened prior to, after World War I and after World War II. So people don't forget. They keep harboring their anger and their hatred, and they want revenge. And there's still a lot of it out there for thousands of years of activities. There's certain groups and people and religions who are seeking revenge. From the beginning, the League has been employed as a means of advancing the interest of the great powers. Well, we know that. They weren't trying to really help people. They were taking care of themselves. According to numerous reports, which seems to be incapable of official verification, but emanating from unusually reliable sources, Germany and Poland have entered entered into a secret treaty whereby the latter was ultimately relinquished to Polish quarter. A little warm out here. To Germany in exchange for Germany's support in an attempt by Poland to gain control of Lithuania, peaceably or otherwise. So much to read in these things. I'm only reading you a small tidbit of this stuff. I think I did enough to prove my point. While many obstacles to a permanent world peace still remain, it is obvious that with all the powers making a seemingly sincere effort to arrive at a better understanding by diplomatic means, the possibilities of an armed conflict in Europe are becoming increasingly remote. This is in 1934, and 6 years later we have World War II. So who are you going to believe? Today is the tomorrow of yesterday, and yesterday of tomorrow. Its importance lies in its later relation. But without its yesterday, there is no today. Without today, there can be no tomorrow. The efforts of yesterday make reflex the same acts of today, and new efforts of today make possible new accomplishments for the efforts of tomorrow. That's stuff you find when you read. Alright, so the journeyings. On the evening of the 23rd, I gave a dinner at the delegates that were in Washington on Masonic missions at that time. At about 126 were present, and all seemed to enjoy it. There were 2 active members of the Northern Supreme Council, 4 of the Southern, besides myself. The head of each were 4 York Rite bodies. In the District of Columbia, the Secretary of War, past Grand Master Dern, and brethren from each of the following legislations and embassies: Romania, Guatemala, Sweden, Great Britain, Bolivia, Yugoslavia. Again, my point of reading these magazines is, these people are everywhere. All these pages here are just activities. Men wanted. The nations needs Christian men who have conviction, men who are willing to do and dare, men who have the vision to see the opportunity of service and are not afraid. They advertise for people, but if you were over there in China, they would have the same ad. They would say, the nation needs more Buddhists. If you were in Israel, and the nation needs more Jewish leaders. If you're in some Arab country, and the native needs more Muslims. Wherever country these people go, they hearken to that particular religion, to reel people in. And then you got Masonic notes, like I've showed you before. And they got the Knights Templar here, the English Masons, the Masonry of friendliness between nations, Virginia, the NCO, let's see here, Grand Commander of Boston, Weds. Young Masons hold 2 important offices, unauthorized solicitors of Masonic funds, positions wanted. These are just some of the Masonic Lodge meetings. The places. You got Missouri, and there's pages after pages of the different states and countries with the meetings. In memorial, they got the people who died who were Masons. And books and all kinds of stuff you can buy if you get this magazine. And then on the back of it, more things you can buy. So it might behoove you, it might be enjoyable reading if you have an inquiring mind, to go on a used book site like Abe Used Books or Abavis, or there's 6 or 7 good used book sites on the internet, and just plug in the New Age, and in the keyword put Freemasonry, and you'll see these, or the blue ones. And you'll read all this stuff. And maybe you'll realize that there is a secret organization ruling things, making decisions. And according to my research, like I have a book called The Population Bomb, I need to go over and do a video on. And numerous other ones in the 1960s and 70s that show the people running the world, these people, because the book The Population Bomb was by the Club of Rome and another one. And they were worried about too many people, and they had actually written books about how to do away with that. One of them was fake weather, situations, disasters, environmental issues, plagues, viruses, starvation, famines, earthquakes, even asteroids, and even aliens, as President Reagan and Clinton, all of them have said. So make no doubt about it, the people running the world are trying to scheme a way to, whether it's World War III or whatever, to, I guess, seriously reduce the number of people walking around on the planet, so it seems. I'm only trying to prove that the group exists. They wrote books, and there's a lot of interesting discussion in these things. And they do keep themselves a secret. And they're everywhere. Their Masonic lodges are in many corners and many cities, and downtowns have the huge buildings. And it's a huge, huge force. And combined, I believe it's called the Illuminati. So if anybody goes, I don't know what the Illuminati is, you're imagining it. Well, there's plenty of documentation to prove it. And basically it's just all these pages and pages and lodges and all these cities and states and countries all over the world. The combined organization is the Illuminati. With that said, thank you for watching my video. And as I say sometimes, and I should say all the time, God help us all. I think we're going to need it. Rick Miracle, thanking you